Hi, welcome to the first part in the series, The Price of Freedom. My name is Abigail Sassano, and I'm the owner of the HEART program. The HEART program is dedicated to ending violence through a paradigm shift. I offer therapy services, clinical supervision, training, consultation on trauma-informed care, domestic violence expert witness services, and transformational teaching. The the topic for this talk is rethinking assumptions and understanding programming. In the introduction video, I took you through my journey of understanding why it's important to understand violence in order to solve the problem and end it, starting from a place of not understanding it and not knowing that I didn't understand it to getting a better understanding of how and why it works, how and why it happens, and what works to solve the problem. The way we're currently viewing violence as a crime that needs to be punished is actually making the problem worse rather than better. And it's important to make the shift to understanding violence as a crisis of connection and intimacy. So I'm going to talk about some of the assumptions that are really common in talking about violence. Then I'm going to talk about assumptions and how our mind works in general. So one of the assumptions that people have in talking about violence is that we're talking about physical violence. And physical violence is actually a very small, kind of like the tip of the iceberg of harm that happens between people. The vast majority of harm is emotional, mental, and psychological. The second assumption that is really common is that we're talking about two groups of people. One is victims who get hurt, and the other is we have a lot of names for those people. And the related assumption is that when we're talking about people who are violent, we're talking about other people and not us. And those people are not even human, anyways. So those are some of the assumptions that form the basis of how we're currently viewing violence. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about how our mind works and the role that assumptions plays. So I think it's helpful to think of our brain as a computer that's really, really good at processing information, certain types of information. There's a lot of information that comes in through our senses that doesn't necessarily register with the brain. And so something like intuition, when people will ask, well, how did you know that? And it's like, I don't know, just it's intuition. The information is coming in from another source that the brain doesn't register. So it's not a matter of better or worse. It's just different processes. And the process that our brain uses to process information is logic. And logic's a really cool thing. There was a mathematician in the 19th century named George Boole who came up with some arithmetic equations to describe the way that our brain comes to conclusions. And those are actually the equations that algorithms are based on. So we have something like the equation x plus y equals z. And there's a way to solve that equation with more information about what those variables are. And you look at a variable, right? That's basically saying, I don't know. There's a value there, but I don't know what it is. Now, this is a really important thing because in a lot of facets of our culture, we're not really allowed to say, I don't know. I know as a kid, being in class, it was like to say, I don't know the answer to that question. It was like I got punished for it. So I got scared to say, I don't know. Um, and so that's a really important piece of information. This is a variable. I don't know what it is. Um, I know there's information there that I need in order to solve this equation and really understand what's happening. So you have something like x plus y equals 5. Now we have more information. And now, even if we don't know what x and y are, we have some better clues about what those values could be, and then we can make assumptions from there. And there is value in making assumptions. I know there's sayings like, what is that saying? Assumptions make an ass out of you and me. And it's like, well, no, assumptions are necessary because we can't have all the information all the time. The thing is, in using assumptions, it's really important to remember that it is actually an assumption. So if I'm assuming, well, x is 1 and y is 4, because that adds up to 5, that's an assumption. I don't really know that when new information comes in, that maybe x is a 2, that means that the responsible thing to do is to revise my assumptions based on the new information. And that doesn't happen a lot of times too, because again of the way that we have been programmed and the way we have been punished for having the wrong answer. And so a lot of times making an assumption that ends up being inaccurate feels like having the wrong answer, and we get scared to admit that, even though we haven't done anything wrong, because that's actually how our brain is supposed to be used. We come up with assumptions, we get new information, which either confirms it or, you know, shows us that our assumption was inaccurate, and we can revise it. So that fear of being wrong, which just means having inaccurate information, which we don't really have a whole lot of control over, because if we receive inaccurate information from someone, it's not like we chose that. So that fear of having inaccurate information or of not having enough information, those fears are something that really hinder our ability to use our brain effectively. And it can actually take quite a bit of courage to face those fears and to get comfortable with that process of um, um, realizing and admitting I don't know. And in the introduction video, I told you the story of a time when I didn't know how to say that. I didn't know how to say I don't know. And it's really interesting because now I do know how to say I don't know. And I noticed like it will come up a lot when people are asking me about other people. Like they'll ask me like, why is he doing that? Or, what is she planning to do? And I'm like, I don't know. You should ask her. And it's really funny because I've noticed that people will keep asking that question. Whenever I said I don't know to, they'll like ask it in different ways. And I find that really amusing because I'm like, I don't know. I'm not withholding information from you. um, I don't know the answer to that. And, it doesn't make sense to use my energy to try to guess because I don't need that information. Okay, so we've got these equations of x plus y equals 5. We've got variables and we've hopefully got some information. And, eventually we have some information. And then we have zeros. So x plus y plus 0 equals 5. Well, the zero value has zero value. It doesn't do anything to help us solve the equation and figure out what's happening. And that can be thought of as irrelevant information. And one of the ways that our mind is interfered with is we're bombarded with irrelevant information. So if I had the equation x plus y plus 0 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 equals 5, by the time I get to the equals 5, my brain is exhausted and I don't even process the 5, which was the relevant part. Another way that our mind is interfered with is we are bombarded with propaganda. Propaganda has a kernel of truth to it, and it's packaged in emotionally provocative content that actually stuns our ability to think and to discern the accuracy of the information, the relevance of the information, and how it fits into the equation. So those are some of, that's a description of how our mind functions, how it works, and also how it's interfered with. When we're not using our mind the way it's intended, which is to process information, discern for accuracy or inaccuracy, and use that information to come up with meaning and conclusions that we can act upon. Then that can cause problems for us, and we can be presented with sort of counterfeit solutions that I call programs. So if we're looking at the equation of seeing behavior in someone else that doesn't make any sense to us, or we don't understand it, we don't know why they're doing that, then if our brain is functioning the way it's supposed to, then we can recognize the missing information. I don't know why they did that. And we can start to look for that missing information. Of course, one of the ways that we can look for that missing information is to go to the person and say, "Why did you do that?" Which basically conveys to someone, "You did it wrong. You shouldn't have done that." Criticism, and so people get defensive, and then we don't get the information we need. So rather than allow for the space of confusion of, again, I don't know, I don't have an explanation, and we hate that. We hate that. And it takes a lot of courage to hold the space for that. I don't know. And I think that's one of the values of like the scientific method. It's like, we don't know. We don't know why that happens. And so what gets offered to us is kind of ready-made explanations that don't require any thought, and they're like prepackaged, and I hear people use these all the time, and I'm just like, where did that come from? And so when it comes to violence, the kind of ready-made solutions, or hey, if someone got hurt, they probably deserved it somehow. Um, or that person's a monster. Um, Another one that's really common is they're crazy, they're mentally ill, they're insane, um, uh, or they're evil. And so what those programs do is they basically um, short circuit the thinking process that was stalled. Because now that I have an explanation, well, the case is closed, and there's no reason to even entertain new information, let alone continue to seek it. Um, so when it comes to the um, functioning of our minds, um, it's really important to take the time to process the information that we have been presented. Part of it is discerning, is this information accurate? Where did this information come from? Um, and when I say, is this information accurate, it doesn't mean that, we're accusing, like if someone's giving us information, we're accusing them of being a liar. Because a lot of times people don't realize that the information that they have is inaccurate because they haven't really used critical thinking to decipher it. So it's the discernment of, is the information accurate? Is the information not accurate? Where did it come from? How does this fit in with existing information that I have? Um, and I think the other part of um, protecting the functioning of our brain is being willing to um, be discerning about what information we consume. Um, so information can be presented as, um, let's set the table, let's put this meal on the table, people will come sit down, eat a meal, or um, we can throw plates of food at people. And a lot of our modern culture is operating that way, where we're literally being bombarded with information that we don't want and we don't need and we didn't ask for, and isn't even digestible. It isn't even digestible. Um, so giving ourselves the time to digest the information that we've ingested, being discerning about the information that we digest. And then the third part of rethinking assumptions, I will admit, requires an enormous amount of courage. And that is to be willing to rethink anything and everything. To understand that there really isn't any harm in asking questions, and that anything that is true can withstand questions, and really becomes more true with questions. And when I say questions, I mean actual questions, like exploring questions, like, is this really true? Let me check it out. As opposed to, often attacks are phrased as questions. And so I'm not suggesting that. I don't think it's helpful to attack people or attack ideas or Attacks aren't helpful. But questions, questions. I don't know. I'm just asking from a place of not knowing. If I'm asking from a place of knowing or already thinking that I know, then it's not really a question. Um, it's something else. Um, so, um, rethinking assumptions, understanding programming, um, looking out for those ready-made and packaged explanations um, that are such a part and parcel of our society that they no longer get questioned. And um, some of them may be true and some of them may not be. The next part of the series is what responsibility really is. So I invite you to join me in the next step of this journey.